Falls Cape State Park. My name is Marlee. I am the park interpreter here. Because we know a lot of people can't get out to their state parks, we wanted to bring our park to you. So if you're not familiar with Falls Cape, we are at the very southern point of Virginia Beach. To our north is the community of Sandbridge, to our south is North Carolina, and we are surrounded by water. To the west is Back Bay, and to our east is the Atlantic Ocean. So Falls Cape State Park is well known for its spectacular beauty, like the Maritime Forest we are standing in right now. But Falls Cape is actually home to some really cool historic stories as well, and historic landmarks. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about the historic community of Wash Woods that was established in this part of the park from the 1850s through about the 1930s. Before we talk about Wash Woods, though, I think it's really important when you're in Virginia that you recognize that European settlers were not the first people to live on the land. And that is true in Falls Cape as well. So we actually have archaeological evidence that dates back 5,000 years that was found right here in Falls Cape. When you guys think about ancient civilizations, you might think about ancient Egypt. But at the same time the pyramids at Giza were being built, we had people living right here in what is now Falls Cape State Park. So if you come out to visit Falls Cape, you will see that we are a very remote state park. You cannot drive yourself here. You have to bike, hike, or boat in. And so you might wonder why people would want to live here in the 1800s when it was even more remote. People came to Falls Cape for a couple different reasons. The first reason was shipwrecks. You may have heard of the term the graveyard of the Atlantic, but off our coast here in Virginia, we had dozens, at least dozens of shipwrecks. And some of those shipwreck survivors just decided to stay where they wrecked and make a new life for themselves here. A second reason why people might have come to this area was if they were trying to run away from their local sheriff. This land had a reputation for lawlessness dating all the way back to when the colonies of Virginia and North Carolina were trying to establish their boundaries. So this was a great place to run to if you were trying to escape the law. The third reason why people came to this area, to the community of Wash Woods, was to find a simpler way of life. In the 1850s, there was a horrific yellow fever epidemic in Norfolk and Portsmouth. It killed thousands. And so people thought that moving their families out here was the best way to escape disease and live that simpler life. But life here was simple and very, very difficult. Everyone living here lived a subsistence lifestyle, which means that they grew their own food, they raised their own livestock. People probably had a couple cows, maybe a couple horses and pigs. And people also had to be expert hunters and fishermen to be able to survive out here. Even though life was really difficult, the people who lived in Wash Woods had some really cool adaptations or life hacks they used to make life a little bit more comfortable. So the first life hack I want to talk about here in Wash Woods was a plant called the Yaupon holly, and we have an example of that plant right here. It's this tall plant. In the winter it would have red berries, like another species of holly you might be more familiar with, American holly. And Yaupon holly was an incredibly useful plant for people in Wash Woods because you can make a delicious tea from its leaves. Yaupon holly tea is especially great because Yaupon holly is the only native North American plant that has caffeine in it. So you can actually still buy Yaupon holly today. This is what dried Yaupon holly leaves look like. You can make a tea out of those leaves. But unfortunately, Yaupon holly got a bad reputation because the scientific name for Yaupon holly is Ilex vomitorium, so not particularly appetizing. The second life hack that people in Wash Woods used was they kept several guinea fowl or guinea hens in their yard. And guinea hens are a kind of goofy looking bird. This is a picture of some. And guinea hens are voracious bug eaters. So if you kept a guinea hen in your yard, it would eat a radius of about 100 yards around your house and eat up all of the ticks and other biting insects that you don't want near where you are living. So the third thing that the Washwoods residents could have done to help make life a little bit easier here was to not nail down their floorboards, which might sound a little bit weird, but if a bad storm was coming, Washwoods residents would pull up those floorboards and nail them to the walls, and that served two purposes. One, it reinforced their walls, and two, if the floodwaters came into their house, they were able to recede without causing too much damage. If you didn't pull up your floorboards and they were nailed down, your house might have ended up washed away into Back Bay. Unfortunately, we don't have any houses left from the community of Washwoods, but we do have some other structures from that community. The first one we're going to look at is actually the steeple of the Methodist Church of Washwoods, and we're going to walk through the woods a little bit on our way to see that steeple. So if you come to Washwoods on your own to visit the park, a couple of animals you might see in this maritime forest would be coyotes, bobcats, maybe white-tailed deer, and maybe you can hear some cardinals chirping around us. Lots of birds like to live in this maritime forest, so keep an eye out for them on your way here. All right, so inside this structure is the steeple of the Washwoods Methodist Church. Parts of the church were taken as souvenirs and to build fires over the year, and so the steeple is all that we have left, and we built this structure here to protect what we have left. This steeple is actually made of cypress, which is a really fantastic building material for this area. Because cypress is extremely resistant to rot. But cypress is not a native plant. It does not grow here. So this cypress that made the Washwoods Methodist Church actually is from a shipwreck. That ship was called the John S. Woods, and it wrecked in about 1895. So that's when the original church was built. That original church could only accommodate a couple dozen people, but in the early 1900s, the community at Washwoods expanded the church to accommodate up to 300 people. This is actually a picture of what that church would have looked like when it was expanded. So this church, you might wonder, why do you need a church that can accommodate 300 people back here? And that's because the Washwoods Methodist Church was the site of a huge religious event called a revival. And the revivals held here were attended by people from all over Princess Anne County. Unfortunately, the revivals kind of fell out of favor by the 1920s, and when they stopped the revivals, the church was largely abandoned. But until that time, this area was really the central meeting point of the entire Washwoods community. So one of the other really awesome features that we have left is actually the cemetery from that Washwoods community. We're gonna walk over into the cemetery, but I just want to remind you, if you are here visiting on your own, please be respectful as you enter the cemetery, because the people whose ancestors are buried here are still living in the area, and they consider this to be a very sacred space. So please be respectful when you come and visit. might have noticed some really interesting features of this cemetery. One of them is that there are shells at all of the grave sites. Originally, all of the graves would have looked like these two here, with shells covering the entire burial spot. And that was for a really practical reason, because this land is constantly moving and changing, and you don't want the soil over the burial to be eroded by the wind. So the shells helped prevent that. Another really practical reason to have shells here is that we don't have very many wildflowers. So you couldn't leave wildflower remembrances for your loved ones. Instead, they left shells. Another really interesting feature of this cemetery is actually a plant. So this plant that you can see right here, this is called Spanish moss. Spanish moss, even though it's called a moss, is actually a type of flowering plant called an epiphyte. So that makes it a cousin of the pineapple. Spanish moss would have been used by our Washwoods residents as fire starter or for cushioning and mattresses, but Spanish moss is home to a lot of little bugs and critters, so I would not recommend that you use Spanish moss for your own cushions today. We are constantly learning new things about the people who lived here in Washwoods. We're constantly learning new stories from the descendants of those people who live in the area. And that is a really exciting thing for us here as a state park, to constantly be learning new stories and finding new artifacts. So I hope you enjoyed this really quick tour of one of our cool historic sites at False Cape State Park. If you've got any questions about things I've talked about, please post a comment below this video and we will get back to you as soon as we can. If there's any other place in the park you would like to see on video, also leave us a comment and we will try to make a video there as well. So thank you guys very much, and I hope you have a great day.